So I have a little topic for us tonight, and this might be a little bit clunky, but and this is on the fly for me, just this thought. But if you have questions for tonight, I'm not going to do them on the Q&A here. I'm going to have you. I'm going to talk, of course, for a little bit first. But if you do have questions, I'm going to have you email them to me. For Will, you can email them to will@sundaysangha, SANGHA.net. And if you email me your questions, I'm going to read them that way from my phone. Yeah. So I think Pulkit posted it in the chat, the thing, but the chat is not public now, so you can't chat that way. So let's have you do that. You send, if you have questions for the Q&A period, you can send them to will@sundaysangha.net, and I'll choose the questions that way and read them. So let me just say a couple words about the Zoom bombing thing, just because some of you may not know about that, but it's just trolling, you know, simple trolling. We're in these very serious times that matter, where people, it's time of life and death. All times are times of life and death, but it's sort of feeling closer for a lot of us right now. And of course, even at times like that, there are people who are home and just bored, and that's the place that they're in. And they're organizing around how to interrupt meetings by saying things that they know will get a rise out of people and that will kind of blow up whatever situation they're in. So we've kind of limited that to some degree, but obviously I didn't think that our gathering would be that interesting. I guess it's, you know, whatever. So, but that's what that phenomena is. And it's just people trying to get reactions. And so, of course, luckily we practice, right? The point is not to react to small potatoes, you know? And of course they say things that are not small potatoes to try to get that kind of response. So anyway, that's why I'm not addressing any of the content, because it doesn't matter, or because I know what it is and where it's coming from, at least on that level. But it is a thing that we can all take in, that how, you know, how sad that that is the place that that's what people are doing with their time, when there's so much need in the world and so much serious, important, so many serious, important things to attend to and take care of. But this is as it is, right? So I have a few things that I want to talk about tonight, because I know, and just because I've been in dialogue with many of you, and I know that you know, things are just intensifying. They're getting harder in so many ways, in so many different places. And even just for those of you who haven't faced any serious loss yet in terms of work or livelihood, or, you know, friends or family in serious condition. Even so, just the challenges of being, you know, sheltering in place and not being able to go out, or having to, you know, have your whole family at home while you're trying to get anything done. This is a challenging time. So I want to just speak to a few aspects of practice. Some of these are themes I've been touching on during the morning meditations, because usually I give a short teaching after them, but here's an opportunity where I can kind of expand on some of these things a little bit, so we can talk about how do we actually practice with these conditions, you know? And what can we learn here in terms of being a human being. So one piece that I touched on in the morning meditations was what I called practicing at the point of contact, at the moment of contact. So it's not a term that comes from me. This is connecting to the early Buddhist teachings from the early discourses. But in every moment of sense experience, there is a kind of contact where we're contacted through the senses. Yeah? So that contact is the moment of seeing, yeah, where it's appearing through seeing. The world is appearing through seeing. Or somebody says something, or you hear a voice, a sound, a bird, caw. That's the contacting, right? Hearing. That's the moment of the arising. Yeah? Or you feel a pain in your knee. That's a moment of contact. It's contacting through feeling, sensing. It's unpleasant. Or maybe something pleasant is contacting you. You see something that's pleasant. Maybe you see something that's unpleasant. So there's often a feeling tone that comes with this moment of contact. But we are contacted not just through the senses, the usual 5 senses. You know, you touch something hot, that's the kind of contact. Yeah. You smell something, that's the kind of contact. Right? And this contact is an important moment, because when we practice meeting the moment of contact with awareness, we're present for the cascade of kind of sequence or reaction that follows. Right. So if we're aware for the moment of contact with seeing, and then we're present for the pleasantness that comes with it, that usually leads us to crave what we see or to grasp onto something. If we're aware of the unpleasantness, we can be present for the habitual reaction of like turning away or pushing away or running away. That's often a habitual response that comes from the unpleasantness that comes with the contact. Yeah. Or similarly with the body, there's a contacted by an emotion, feeling, you know, anger, fear, sadness. Yeah. That's the kind of contact. And of course, there's not just the usual 5 senses, but in Buddhist psychology, they talk about the mind as a sense door. So that's another term from those teachings. They talk about the sense doors. The eyes are a sense door, where, you know, like lets it in. The ear is a sense door. Body, sense door. Taste, smell. But also the mind is a sense door, in the sense that things don't just arise through seeing, they arise in the mind. Right? A thought arises in the mind, and in a sense, it makes contact with awareness. Yeah, just like a sight does, or a sound. A perception, you know, a narrative, a story, those appear in the mind. And usually we don't include it like that. Like it's just another sense door in which experience is appearing. And this is a big part of why we're so ruled by our minds, because we're not present for the moment of contact, the moment of the arising. Yeah. So that's one of the things we're including, is practicing at the moment of contact. Yeah. Of course, you have to be present to be here for the moment of contact. Seeing, unpleasant. Hearing, pleasant. Yeah. Hearing, unpleasant. You ever had anybody say something to you that was unpleasant? I know you have. Where was the unpleasantness? It's in the mind. Right? The unpleasantness is not in their words. It's not located outside of you. The unpleasant is in the mind. So if we're present for the moment of contact, hearing, boom, you feel the unpleasant. Boy, is that a moment of possible choice. Yeah. If we're not present for that moment, we automatically end up in the reactive, almost automatically in the reactive pattern. You know, either reacting against or shutting down or what have you, but boom, you feel the unpleasant. There's still awareness, space, choice. Yeah. I practiced like that when I saw the chat a moment, you know, when I opened my eyes in the meditation, and that's not what I expect. Seeing, boom, and a feeling too. That's what we practice with. That's just all in a day's work, right? Just that's what we're doing all the time, hopefully. And that's so empowering, actually, when you start to feel that spaciousness, that choicefulness around the moment of contact, around the unpleasant, right? Because that's usually what sends us into our cycles of craving, you know, or into our cycles of aversion. Or the contact can be neutral. Yeah, this is, again, an early teaching of the Buddha. That sense, that feeling tone of pleasant or unpleasant, there's a Pali term for it from the kind of the language that the Buddhist discourses were first written in. Many of you know this, but it's always worth a refresher on this part. Yeah, Vedana is the term in Pali. I mean, you know, roughly translated as feeling tone. That's a huge amount of what starts the, kind of precipitates the cycle of, what we do with pleasant and unpleasant. So we're practicing at the point of contact through the senses, in the body, and in the mind. Right? That's so important. So you're going through your day. What can you practice with? Where is the place you can practice? Can you practice in the future? No, you can't. And can you practice in the past? You can't. Can you take care of a future moment? You can't take care of that moment. Of course you can think about it, you can do some planning, and that's totally fine, but you can't take care of that future moment. And that's why, proliferating about the future often makes you feel so powerless, because it's a virtual domain that you can't do anything about right now, much of the time. If there is something you can do it right now. But and of course that action you can do is right now, but most of that proliferating you can't do much about. And that leaves you feeling very powerless, okay? Because you're not practicing where the thing is. Where is the thing when the future is proliferating? It's right here. Boom. The future and the past aren't anywhere. They arise as thoughts in the mind, right here. And so you can practice at the place of contact. Boom. Future. It looks like this. It's looking like this right now in this moment. Yeah, and you can start to notice when you practice like this, oh, depending on how I happen to be feeling, my future scenes look quite different. Yeah, you feel a little down or a little tired or a little, just whatever, the mood is sort of, and then watch the futures that appear. They often correspond to your feeling state. Then you have a little bit of coffee. Hopefully you still have some coffee, or you were able to procure some. There's a little energy in the system, and all of a sudden your future's, I see some possibilities. Maybe it'll be okay, what have you. Yeah. So, but practicing at the point of contact is practicing where experience actually is. It's the only thing we can practice with. Yeah. And so I shared on the Wednesday call we had last week, we had a little Q&A session last Wednesday. A Sufi story of Mullah Nasruddin. And Nasruddin, many of you know, is a wise fool. In many cultures, they have this character, the wise fool. Yeah. And why is the fool wise? Well, because the fool is not in the conventional reality. The fool is seeing on a different level. Yeah. And so the story of Nasruddin is a common story. Many of you may have heard it. Nasruddin is outside of his house at night. He's under a lamp, a street lamp, and he's looking around on the ground. He's on his hands and knees. And his friend comes along and says to him, Nasruddin, what are you doing? What are you doing out here? Why are you on the ground? And he says, I'm looking for my key. I lost it. So his friend, of course, gets down with him on his hands and knees, and they're searching and they're searching. And they search for a while. And finally, his friend says to him, he says, Nasruddin, are you sure that you lost your key right here? And Nasruddin says to him, oh, no, I didn't lose it here. I actually lost it on the other side of the house. His friend says, well, what are we doing? Why are we here searching? And he says, well, the light is so much better here. I don't know if this story relates at all to what I'm talking about, but in case it does, to me, the moral of that is we're often looking in the wrong place. Yeah. Actually, there are many layers of lesson to that story. But one layer is that, we're often, looking where we think it's easiest to look. And often the default is like, I'll just figure it out for later. But we're looking where the key is not. And we want to look where the key is. We want to look in the right place. Because you don't look where the key is, you're not going to find the key. And the key, when it comes to your experience, is right here and right now. And it's arising. It's appearing through one of the senses. Whether, if it's in the domain of phenomenal experience, it's either one of the 6 senses, in the 5 senses, or in the mind. Yeah. So this is, that's often not the place we want to practice sometimes. I just want to deal with something else. I don't want to be with what is. But this is where, this is the only thing, this is where we need to deal with, with the core of it. Right? And this is where freedom is to be found. It's to be found here and now, not in some imagined future. So this relates to not only time, but space. Right? So it relates to time in the sense that many of you, I'm sure, are thinking about time. You're thinking, how long is this thing going to last? How long am I going to not know, not be able to go to work? Or how long am I going to have to homeschool my kids? Or how long am I not going to be able to go out or see people? Maybe you're living alone. How long is it going to be? So I want to talk a little bit about psychological time. Because this is something that those of us who have been on kind of interminable silent retreats, and I say interminable just because they're too long to think about, like 3 or 6 months long. We've had to deal with time in some way. What we've had to deal with is not actually time. It's with our thoughts about time. So this is something, if you're practicing at the place of contact, that you can notice and include. You can include thoughts about time, and you can learn something about how your thoughts about time shape your experience. Because as soon as you have a thought about time, you experience time in a certain way. And often we don't notice this. We just think, oh, it's a long time. Yeah. And if you're sitting in meditation and you think like, oh my gosh, this is going to be 5 more minutes. I can't sit here still for 5 more minutes. It becomes a torture. Yeah? Just thinking about how long it's going to be when you have some discomfort in the present. Yeah? And it's very hard to work with that time. And the reason it's hard to work with it is because it doesn't exist. It only exists in this virtual domain. So you can't be with the imagined 5 minutes because they're not anywhere. And you're not being with this moment, just this moment. And any of you who have gotten through really challenging things have learned something about just handling this moment, this step, this breath, right? This whatever, just this. You've learned that by attending to this moment fully, you can get through unspeakable hardships. Yeah? And some of you I know because you tell me about what you've practiced through in terms of illness and near-death experiences and these really challenging things, right? Or incredible loss, right? Heartbreak. All kinds of things that you practice through. And when you practice through challenges like this, we have to learn something about psychological time. So when you think of time, you experience time. We got to notice that so that you can be aware, oh, now I'm thinking about time. Now I'm waiting. If you're waiting for something to be over and it's actually not over immediately, then you're in this kind of like holding pattern. It's easy to try to wait until like a crisis is over, but it's a very tense place to wait. And waiting is just you holding out for this thing, right? So this is not the same as like not having hope or anything. Hope is great to have, fine. You should have, or to not be able to imagine a future. We want you to be able to imagine a future. It's important. But life happens here and now. And so I really invite you, as you're practicing through the day, to practice with being present And when you're present, to notice that this is here. Yeah. And to notice then when you have thoughts about time and include them as mental events. Yeah. Then you can start to rework your relationship to this kind of psychological time. Yeah. Because we live in psychological time when we don't have a relationship with the present. We tend to live in these thought worlds that are really virtual, they're imaginary. Sometimes we live our whole life always on our way somewhere and imagine somewhere and never really where we are. So if you learn anything about transform at all your relationship to psychological time here, to notice that when you're not thinking about the time like that, it doesn't exist in that way. I think this would be very valuable for you to look at. And you probably need, daily formal practice is very helpful, and having enough stability and awareness to be able to be present at the moment of contact or at the place of contact when we're talking about the mind and thinking. You need a little bit of a foundation. If you're brand new and you're not super interested, if you're really interested, sometimes interest can be enough to just have you have enough continuity of awareness to notice the moment of contact in the mind. Yeah, actually, interest in watching the mind can be enough, if at times. Yeah. So, but for many of you, I think it's very useful to have some relationship where you're practicing being here, you're already here. Practicing being here just means noticing that you're here, remembering to notice, and having that be happening again and again through the day. Oh yeah, still here. Oh yeah, this is appearing. Yeah, it's not only appearing externally, it's appearing here. So this leads me to the quote from Hamlet, which I kind of dropped in at the end of one of our morning sessions, right? And I think this is also a useful thing because we're talking about time. When you get caught by psychological time, you lose the sense of boundless, the timeless present, which has space in it. So time and space are quite related. Yeah. So when you're saying, oh, this is 6 more months or 3 more months or 2 more months, or even how long will it be? Yeah. Notice that's a thought arising in the mind. Notice how it shapes the seeing. Notice when it passes away and notice what's left. And here. Yeah. Because we can have a narrative about how life is going to really start after, well, we can have that narrative about anything, and we often do. I'll be really present as soon as ... right? Life will begin after ... So I'm saying this about time also for those of you who are going through really difficult things right now, right? Take care of this moment. Take care of yourself in this moment. Care for yourself in this moment. Yeah? And the future is a succession of present moments. Yeah? And we can only attend to this moment. This is the only moment we can respond to skillfully. And we notice when we extend what's happening right now in psychological time, can become unbearable. It's unbearable because the imagined future of that thing is unbearable. But this moment often we can be with. I can be here with this moment. And that way we get through unspeakable challenges. Right? And they know this even in terms of relating to pain, right? It's like they found out, they've discovered that if you give people who have chronic pain or really serious pain anti-anxiety medication, it reduces the perceived pain. And that's so interesting. Sometimes I make a little slip and I say meditation instead of medication, but it was medication. But it's that the non-anxiety actually reduces the perceived pain in the present, because that has a relationship to that. Anxiety always is related to the future. Right? Anxiety arises in the gap between what's now, and the imagined future. Fear can arise just immediately, but anxiety always needs a future because it's about the unknown, about what's next. So I'm saying this for you as another key, as something you can hold on to. Can I be with this moment? Can I be with this moment? Yeah. And in this way, we're practicing where we can, right? We're practicing where life is actually happening. This is, the work of this moment. So I want to relate the topic of time to the topic of space, because this is another thing that people are feeling a lack of sometimes, a lack of space, right? Well, I don't have my freedom. I can't go out. I can't, talking to some folks in New York, I can't get out. I can't like go walk. I can't, be free. I can't move freely, right? And so this is why that quote from Hamlet is a relevant pointer. Right, so it's where Hamlet says, "I could be bounded in a nutshell, and count myself the king of infinite space, but that I have bad dreams." I hope maybe that's a paraphrase, but it's pretty close. I could be bounded in a nutshell, and count myself the king of infinite space, but that I have bad dreams. So there's an interesting insight there, and there's a lack of something in that statement too, and we can get to both of them. So the insight is that obviously Shakespeare had was that boundless space, infinite space, doesn't relate to physical space. That he understood something about infinite space being an aspect of the mind, of awareness or being, presence. Because otherwise you can't say I could be bounded in a nutshell and count myself the king of infinite space. So it's speaking to something about the spaciousness of it that's available, but also something about the obstacle to that, to accessing that spaciousness, to being the, I don't know about the king of it, but just like the accessing that spaciousness. And in the pointer there is the bad dreams. Right? So what are the dreams? What are bad dreams? The bad dreams are thoughts. Thoughts, like time, give us an experience of space. And they also often, when we don't see thoughts as arising in the space of awareness, when thoughts are not seen as events, they are shaping. Yeah. So that's where our sense of limitation or lack of space can really often come from, because you're not feeling that lack of space all the time. Actually, when you're not thinking about it, you're probably not feeling it. Yeah, and you might not notice that correlation. So I'm not saying it's easy to deal with the mind in this way. I'm saying it's necessary. Right? I'm not saying, oh, you should be able to, these things I'm talking about, you'll hear it, and then you say, oh, great, I'm the king of infinite space, and actually I'm not worried about time. I just, there's plenty of, I'm just in the bliss of the now. No, this is a path. This is going to be a practice for you. So I'm not saying it's easy, but I am saying it's necessary. It's important. Even a little bit of freedom in relationship to the psychological time construction is a huge deal experientially. Even a little bit of freedom in relationship to your thoughts, your bad dreams, brings a bit of spaciousness here and now. And this will take some practicing, but if you're suffering, that's motivation. If you're feeling limited or confined, let that be motivation to you to explore this territory directly. Right? What else are we going to do? We need to work in this territory. It's actually important all the time. That's why those of us who have been teaching this stuff, we've been teaching the same stuff. But I think in times when we're suffering, in times where it's really challenging, those are times when we get clearer about what's important. Yeah? And we get clearer also about what we're facing, what we're dealing with. Right? So, in a way, that comment from Hamlet shows insight, right? But Hamlet was not that free, right? Hamlet was an unhappy guy in a lot of ways, right? So Hamlet had this insight both about the spaciousness and about what was taking over, but he didn't have a path to practice with it. He didn't have a method or a methodology, sort of like, to work with these dreams. What is the nature of these dreams? What is the nature of the infinite space. How is this infinite space related to me, to what I am? So it's quite a privilege, actually, to have access to some of these liberating teachings. Even though nowadays it could be like, oh, it's everywhere. It's just like, oh, meditation, but this was like a precious thing to come into contact with these teachings, and very rare in history, to be able to access a kind of teaching and a path for practice. So when we have, the basic instructions that we have, I hope you will practice at the moment of contact when you have dreams, waking dreams. You will seeing, notice the scene that's appearing. You breathe with it, you'll watch it. Notice the feelings that come with it, the sensations, so you don't think it's reality. So that you're not totally shaped by it, whether it's a vision of how other people are, or how the world is, or how you know it's going to be, how you fear it's going to be, right? Or about yourself, who I am, who I'm not, who I could have been, who I should have been, who I will be once I do, all of these, we also want to practice at the moment of contact. These, when we're locked in this story layer, the story of me, the story of where I'm going, the story of the world, even the story of the world. Your story of the world is not the world. And it's not that it's not useful to have narratives and to have history and to be able to read and get information. All of that is important. But you don't have a complete picture. Yeah? And living inside of your story, even when it's a useful one, is limiting too. Because awareness itself is not limited by stories. You're not living inside of a story of me in time, a story of me within this time and the world. Your own being, your nature, your own wakefulness is boundless. It is space. It's like space itself, but with this presence to it, with this vivid wakefulness that allows everything to appear. So you don't have to feel that all the time. You don't have to feel that at all. It just is here. And we can practice a lot with what's arising. When you're practicing with what's arising, when you're present with what's arising at the moment of contact, whether it's in the mind, in the body, in the emotional body, whether it's sensations or sights or sounds, when you're present with that, you're in the domain. You are inhabiting, even if you're not aware of it, the spaciousness that you are. So I wish, sometimes you could wish, like, I wish Hamlet knew that. Wish Hamlet knew he could practice with his dreams. Yeah. And we often will wish that for our former selves. I wish I had that idea before. I wish I'd known that earlier. Or maybe you wish it for somebody else. I wish they could know that. But I think it's a very understandable feeling, to have. So today we're talking about practicing with psychological time and with that which kind of boxes in, or how we can, when we identify with what's arising, or we just live inside of the narrative. It's like making a little house. There's like a vast field. It's like building this little house and just living inside of it, and forgetting about this vast field that you are. The house can be part of it. The house. Now my metaphors are getting all mixed up. This house is changing all the time. You start watching your mind and your thoughts, and it's up and down, and it's all around, and you're seeing this way and that way, and you get a new piece of information, you have a new view, and all of this is fine and can be very useful too. But let's not forget the field in which it's all appearing. Let's keep coming back to presence, awareness, and practicing with what's appearing here and now, moment by moment, and as it is. Okay. So I'm going to do something that I rarely do during a meditation group, which I'm going to pull out my phone and I'm going to read your questions. Because that's what we're doing now. Now we're doing technology. Let's see. Okay. So as we do the questions, I want to just say a couple things. One is that, please continue to be present. You can use the question period also as a time of, when I use the word practice, it's not like you're practicing for some later time. It's like you're being practice and life are one thing, right? So practice with the questions. When you hear a question, if you think like, oh, I don't like that question or it's not important, just notice that. Notice the reactions you have and how that affects your experience. Yeah? It's not good or bad. You're just noticing. Yeah? If you have in a lot of the questions, I think they do touch a place. See if you can find the question and where it's coming from in your own experience. So here's a question. First of all, the person says, can you tell us how many people are here tonight? I usually tell you. It's true, I usually tell you so you can feel a sense of community. We've had 140 something on, and it kind of fluctuates, but yeah, about 140 now of us, and I think from all over, because I've heard from some of you. And so I hope you can feel that we're sitting and practicing together, even though maybe I'm the only person on the video. And yeah, you're sitting with your community. And that's something that we feel on Sundays when we gather, and we've been able to extend our community to all of your homes. And even to some of you who I know aren't able to join because you don't live in Berkeley or you moved away or something. So that's a very important element. So thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. As I meditate lately, I notice a strong desire for things to be other than they are. Certainly at a global level with the pandemic, but even in how I'm physically sitting or how my tongue is behaving in my mouth, clinging to the roof of my mouth, for example. I love the specificity of that. I think people can relate to those kinds of particulars. Can you speak to how one practices with a desire for things to be other than they are? Does one just sit with resistance, be present with it? I'm tempted to find a way to make even the resistance itself other than what it is. So that's a great topic, great question. So I think there are two layers to this, right? One layer is on one level, it's very wholesome to want certain things to be other than they are. If you see suffering in the world and you want to alleviate that suffering, that's incredibly wholesome. And hopefully that desire will fuel action on your part. Action, and that action, when you take it, that action will be here and now. So on the one hand, that can be a beautiful, energizing, and life-affirming energy. It can also be torturing and lead to you always feeling like things are never where they're supposed to be and they're never enough, because there's so much suffering in the world and there's so much human-caused suffering in the world that's caused by the mind states and mind streams and basically the state of consciousness collectively and in certain places. So one thing I would encourage you to do on that level. So if you can, sort of like the serenity prayer, change the things you can change. Go for it. There's so many things that are like, we want you to use the practice so that you can take action and not fear, failure as much, or not let the fear of failure stop you. I think one thing about wanting things to be different that we need to practice with is that if you're going to work on anything that's really long-term, that you're not going to see results of in like the next week or two, or even the next 5 or 10 years, that are in a way that's going to gratify you, we need to have a way of shifting our relationship to this wanting things to be different. Yeah, it's okay when it's fueling action in the present, but it can become very oppressive if it's all about where it's going. So desire is a state that arises in the present. Wanting, that's the place of contact, and that's the place of practice. Can you sit with wanting? That wanting energy, it drives our whole society. That's craving. You know, just because you're craving for something that you might think is wholesome, of course, like the particular bodily things, probably you don't even consider that, but craving is craving. So you got to notice it so that that energy doesn't drive you in that kind of way that's all about the result. Yeah. You want to work in alignment with your values here and now so that you could work for 10,000 years and not get discouraged. How is that possible if it's just about the outcome? You need the idea of the outcome so that you can work. Like in Buddhism, they have these vows. In Zen, they say like, you know, I vow to liberate all sentient beings. Like, who's going to do that? Well, it's an impossible vow, but it's the intention, right? And so if you just, you know, so that's very important for being able to tackle huge things, you know, is being able to do the work right now, have the fuel of the kind of the motivation. I want to liberate all beings. I want to change the world, but not be in the craving energy about outcome. Like I need it now. So practice with craving as it arises. That could transform your whole life. Yeah, whether it's craving for like, oh, I think I need to sit in a different posture, or just that desire for things to be different. That is a restless energy that will never let you rest until you face the energy itself, the energy of, yeah. And like you said here, does one sit with resistance? See, I'm not sure if it's resistance or if it's desire, but it might be both. Yeah. When you have resistance, be aware of resisting. Yeah. And then see what emerges. That's a very, you know, but I think that you're talking about a kind of like this craving, and it can really link into, this is where for a lot of us who care about the state of the world, this can almost be a place where delusion can really hook in, because you say like, well, the thing that I'm craving is a good and important thing. So it's okay to be in this mode of like, I need to change it. It needs to be different. My challenge to you is, can you be in touch with the motivation and work to change it, but not be coming from that craving, not let that craving energy take you over, so that you can actually work on something for 1,000 years. Yeah. And have it just be the unfolding of right practice, even without seeing a result. Okay. Thank you for that, Julie. Let's see. Okay, here's another one. Since I've heard you talk about how awareness is limitless, while sitting, I sometimes play with trying to bring forward this limitlessness. I'll start with thinking of all the people who live around me, and then all of the people in the Bay Area. Then I'll expand it out further, for example, to include all the planes flying in the sky at that moment, all the living creatures on the planet, to our solar system, etc. At times, this has felt really spacious and interesting, but other times it feels overwhelming and destabilizing, and it highlights how everything is always moving and changing, etc. Is this practicing with awareness, or is it getting stuck in a thought world? I'd love to hear your thoughts. That's a great, I love that. It's both. It's both. You're using thinking to see how big thinking can be. So that's kind of like almost like a trick to see how spacious it can get. You know, you're seeing how spacious. If you imagine the universe, it starts to feel spacious. But that's just how big you can imagine. So it's both maybe okay as a device. I've said that before sometimes when you have a state a strong state that's arising, let it fill the sky, let it fill the universe, let it fill multiple universes. Again, that's a conceptual way of letting, kind of inviting you to let there be room, because there's already room. So maybe what you could notice, what's unstable in that experiment you're doing, is that you can't stably hold the thought, because the thought is not stable. You're creating it. You're creating the universe and the planes and all the people and stuff, and you're trying to hold that, and that's unstable because thinking is not that steady. But what's allowing that to appear is awareness. So, you don't have to go and find the limitlessness of it. Sometimes you can do things like see if you can find the edge of it and you can't find it. See if you can find the center of it and you can't find it. You can't find the limit on it, or an edge or a corner. I think the thing to just notice is just notice that whatever's appearing is included, including if you look out the window, as far as you can see, that's included. That's just as far as you can see. Yeah. So it's actually the awareness. Limitless is just a word. You don't have to experience the limitlessness of it. But it does have this nature that it includes whatever appears, no matter how big it is. And your thought got pretty big, but the thinking is not steady. Yeah. If you practiced visualizations for many, many years, you could maybe hold a stable visualization, but still that would not encompass the vastness of awareness itself. It'd still be a construct within it. So thank you for that. Oh, that's a beautiful question. Thank you, Sam. So this question is from my mom, who I'm sitting with. She wants to know how best to sit with intense physical pain and how to grapple with the deep desire for relief. This is important, and important not to make light of. So meditation doesn't make things easy, right? But it does potentially give you a way to work with some of these really difficult states and experiences that arise. So I'll just say a couple things about practicing with pain. So one is, it can be helpful if you're meditating to have a place to put your awareness that's not just in the body. Yeah, because I talk a lot about the breath as an anchor, or the sense of the body stably sitting as an anchor for the attention. But if there's a lot of physical pain in the body from the beginning, you'll just be sitting with pain a lot of the time. So one thing I'd say is first be in a posture that reduces the physical pain a little bit if you're laying down or something. And this is just a preamble to your question. And then I would encourage you to use hearing as your primary domain of attention. So instead of the breath and the body, hearing happens, and it sort of like it sort of evokes a spacious awareness. Partly because you don't know what sounds are going to arise, so you have to be in this receptive openness. And then the sounds are happening within the space. So even though they're arising here, it sort of like feels more panoramic. Yeah? So that's a place you can develop some concentration, is using hearing. Yeah? And it helps you kind of, in a sense, not be locked in the body, get a sense of spaciousness. And then the body can appear in the context of that. So that's one thing. Another thing for practicing with physical pain, and these are sort of principles that you'll have to practice with, is to notice, is first to find a place in the body that's not in pain. So usually there's some place in a body that doesn't have pain, even if it's your earlobe or my toes have pain in them because I have arthritis in my toes, but some place, your pinky or your elbow, or the tip of your nose, someplace that doesn't have pain, that you can place your attention occasionally so that you can pendulate. It's helpful to have a place in the body that's sort of neutral. Yeah. And you can pendulate from your toe if your toes are not in pain, or your heel if your heel is not in pain, or your, as I said, your elbow. Pendulate between that and the place where there is strong sensation. So pain is also a word, it's a concept. It's not that the sensations aren't real, but sometimes, because they're very vivid, right? They're there. But sometimes the story of pain is different than the actual sensations that are appearing in the present. So that's a whole dimension and domain that you can practice with, noticing a little bit, what are the actual sensations? Can I just feel them as they are for right now, and then move to a neutral place? So touch into it and move away. Touch into it, move away. And sometimes that can bring a little bit of a sense of agency to your relationship to the pain. So the other piece about the pain that is important is that a lot of it is the thinking about time, like I said before. So that you can notice when you're creating a kind of a mental suffering, there's a mental suffering that comes with it around just like anticipating future pain. That's a big part of the suffering that happens with chronic pain. Even though you can know, oh, I'll be feeling this, I know tomorrow. But when we're in that kind of the story of it, that can become very overwhelming and depressing and debilitating, right? Because it's sort of like I said, you can't do anything about the imagined future in that way. So the other piece about pain is that usually we're very identified with it as like, this is me, this is who I am this pain. So that's another place that you can just, notice the story of me and notice that you are in relationship to this experience. When you're present, you're in relationship to the pain that's here. None of this will make it easy. None of this is like easy to do, but this is something, and I'd also recommend, if you haven't read my father's first book, Full Catastrophe Living, it's a book that outlines his 8-week program in the stress reduction program, which he developed to a large degree working with people who have chronic pain and stress-related illness, chronic illness, and chronic pain. So that would be a reference that has a lot more detail. Similar content, but a lot more detail on how to work with pain and potentially transform your relationship to it a little bit. But really, Pulkit posted it in the chat. So thank you, Pulkit. So I also think it's very important to be gentle with yourself around pain, to not like think, oh, I need to tough it out, and not, be gentle and but be in a kind of conscious relationship to how you're working with it. And this is a path. This isn't like something you should be able to do all at once. But when we do even a little bit transform our relationship to the pain, we can greatly reduce, even if the sensations don't change at all. Even if you still have the same level of sensation, what a lot of people have reported through stress reduction program and through other, people who we all know who have practiced, using meditation to work with chronic pain, you can really transform your relationship to those sensations. And some degree, sometimes a lot, sometimes a little, of the kind of mental dis-ease that comes with the physical pain. So in a way, we're distinguishing the mental suffering, which comes from the story about it, the identification, the projecting it into the future, and the kind of, just being averse to it and turning away from it, or just constantly being in an escape mode. When we transform our relationship to the pain a little bit, we can really transform some of that mental suffering. And that can actually reduce the perceived pain, but also just make the pain not be the kind of like the only thing in the space. Yeah. Again, sometimes talking like this, I also feel like, well, it sounds, I worry that I make it sound too easy. I know it's not easy, but it is a path, and it is a path that I think if you explore it, and will take some practice, I think you will not be disappointed. Okay. Thank you for that. Well, this is interesting from Brian. Much of Zoom bombing is now automated. Bots randomly generate Zoom meeting IDs until one works, and then it automatically connects to the chat and fires away. I saw an email from Zoom addressing this. Anyway, it has some helpful suggestions. Thank you, Brian. Good to know. Didn't seem like a very creative Zoom bomb, so maybe that's partly why. This is a question from Coven. I'm on screens a lot now. Work is on a screen, meetings on a screen, socializing on screens, catching up with friends on a screen. The Sangha is on a screen. I live alone. After being on a screen for a while, I feel fatigued and disconnected from my body, from the demand on my attention. One popular solution is to limit screen time. Instead of this, I'm interested in exploring another approach under the theme of including that you have discussed. With the thought to bring practice everywhere, how might I bring my practice to moments when I'm working with a screen? What exercises can I do? Thank you. Great question. I think a lot of people can relate to this right now. You know, one aspect of a response is a practice suggestion. But another aspect I just want to address, because I've noticed it, is that I'm on the screen all day, which is not usually my MO. And even when I'm in very, even when I like what I'm doing on the screen, and I'm on Zoom a lot, I notice that sometimes by the afternoon, if I've been on for hours and hours interfacing, I will feel nauseous. I don't know why. This is anecdotal. But I think there might be something about our perceptual system as humans. We didn't, and I'm not usually on a computer all day, so maybe people who are for everything, they've adjusted to this and your nervous system is adjusted. But I notice that I sometimes feel nauseous. And I notice that if I turn off the video and just don't look at it and connect with the analog world, my senses kind of recover. So there's some aspect that may be, I don't know, have to do with this very weird 2D interface that sort of seems like we're seeing. And so that may have an impact on the perceptual system that is sort of like a little bit, it kind of unsettles it a little bit. And that is just, I don't know if that's the case, but that is what it is. Then we have to learn how to work with it. So I think in the theme of including, I always think, awareness allows us to notice what's actually happening and then hopefully to make more wise decisions, right? Because the decisions have more real-time data, including what's appearing here and here, and more access to like not just the surface layer reactivity, but the deep mind, if you will. So, one of the things I notice when I'm doing this is that when I'm looking at the screen, I'm also seeing the background in the back. I notice, this may seem, I don't know what it seems like. I notice that this allows seeing the background. It's almost like seeing it fuzzy, allows awareness, it helps awareness to settle back in itself. Yeah. And not me get like absorbed into the screen. So I feel like that's a little easier when I'm teaching in this way, rather than just, interacting one-on-one with people or with small groups. But so that's something you might practice, is just like, it's like you actually have this all in your periphery and you're interacting with this. And that actually is a very interesting way of letting awareness settle into itself. It can actually, in Zen, they have some term in some of the texts that talk about like the backward step. This can kind of activate that backward step, which kind of like awareness falls into itself. And then it's just like a little bit non-dual. Maybe not a little bit. Maybe it just is completely. That, I don't know how that sounds. But so my main suggestion would be include the seeing, include the context, include the body and mind, and you might still get nauseous. So you might still make decisions like turn off the video, stand up, tap your head, connect with the analog world. And I think it might be okay. You could ask for some of your meetings to be on the phone. Say like, and you can tell people why. I've done that a few times. Say like, I'm zoomed out. Let's talk on the phone. So I don't know if those are helpful suggestions. In a way, you know, screen, no screen, it's the two-dimensional aspect of it, because experience is like a screen. It's not two-dimensional. It's all appearing, just like this is appearing on this screen. So in that sense, the screen is no different. This is, you know, awareness like a field in which it's appearing, like a screen on which it's appearing. So just to add more confusion. Can you please talk more about what you mean about the point of contact? I think maybe I was misleading when I said the point of contact. Let's talk about the moment of contact. Yeah. The moment of contact is here and now. And this is like, it's that moment of seeing. You close your eyes and you open them and the world appears. This is seeing. It's not like you don't have to catch the moment. It's continual. So when you practice seeing, like if I'm looking and you throw a ball to me, I catch it. That's because I was here, present and ready. Yeah. And so the balls are flying moment by moment, but we're not present to notice them. Oh, boom, boom, boom. And it's not that, you won't catch every ball that is thrown to you, but sort of like, that's a bad metaphor, but the moment of contact is just like, somebody says something and you hear it as sound, and then you notice how the hearing gives rise to feeling. I've had practice with that all the time. Or I just notice it all the time, especially when someone says something that is unpleasant. It's like, unpleasant. That gives me it gives me room to not just go into what my ordinary reactivity would be. That could be a lifesaver. Yeah, because your reactivity can get you killed or get somebody else killed. Right? So that's a very important practice at the moment of kind of seeing. And a shorthand for that is contact, sensation. Contact, sensation. Contact, sensation. Sensation is the feeling tone, pleasant or unpleasant, that sets up the cycle of craving or aversion. Or I didn't mention, but if the contact is neutral, usually we are just in delusion. We don't pay any attention to it. So a lot of our contact is not particularly pleasant or unpleasant. And that's why so much of life we don't vividly include. Because we have this idea, pleasant is good, unpleasant is bad. It's just not true. Right? But that's like our shorthand unconscious idea. And neutral is just uninteresting, not important. When we start being present for all of the neutral contact, we discover, oh my gosh, there's like worlds of life here in between all the things I'm usually paying attention to. Like the present really opens up. And we start to discover that actually when there's not any automatic craving and aversion, there's so much peace here and now. There's kind of an ease. So we tend to live in concept worlds of like, what's an important moment? And that's always like a story, like, oh, there's the important moment. The transition's not, it's on the other side of that. When I get to there's the important moment. When we let go of that made up idea, everything, all of life emerges as life, life comes alive. So that's what I mean by practicing at the moment of contact, through the senses, the body, and appearing in the mind. And I didn't make that up. That's from like 2,500 years ago. Isn't that amazing? Those insights are old, right? This is like the core of this core teachings. I remember the first time I heard that about, the Vedana, the feeling tone, and about how that sets up the whole cycle of becoming and craving. I just thought, I would never have thought of that. I just, that aspect is so subtle. The contact, that subtle pleasant or unpleasantness that determines our whole reaction. I don't know. I remember thinking like, I probably never would have noticed that if I hadn't heard it. So I thought that's a very important teaching. Okay, here's, we only have 3 minutes. So I'm going to just see if I get to this last one. I find that I imagine awareness as you speak of it to be residing in a tiny place in my head, and I have a feeling this limits me. Yes, it does. I know that awareness doesn't exist in a specific place, but somehow it's helpful to imagine it as tiny and inside of me because I can see it as receiving from my mind and all my senses. Is there any advice you would have for this situation? Any other ways to understand awareness? You will never understand awareness as a thought. That's when you're imagining a tiny place in your head, how do you know you're imagining that? That's awareness allows you to know. Yeah. Awareness, you're not going to see it. It's not a location. And a lot of people imagine awareness is in the head, just because we have this idea like I'm in here. But all I'd say is just stay, you are already aware. You don't have to become aware. Life is already appearing. You don't have to figure out where it's appearing to. You won't find a place. It's just appearing. Yeah, like this. Yeah. So you look for awareness, you'll find something. What you'll find is an idea. It's a concept. Any idea that's appearing, notice that idea is appearing. That'll just help it keeps putting you back in the place of awarenessing rather than trying to find awareness. Just let awareness function. It's functioning. And just stay in the awarenessing without trying to find the place it is. And you'll notice your feet are appearing, the head is appearing, body is appearing. If you have a strong headache or a strong thing, notice that headache is appearing within awareness, not the other way around. I remember having some strong head states appearing, and I thought I was trapped in my head until I realized, oh no, the head is appearing. So we have come to the end of our evening together. I hope you will practice at the moment of contact. And we'll do a little closing together, just a little ritual. And just a reminder that if you want to donate to support what we're doing here, all of our donations, and I want to encourage you to, we put up on the website, sundaysangha.net, the organizations that we're supporting. You're really welcome to support them directly. You don't have to do it through us. Sometimes this is just a way of encouraging it and making it easy, because we want to really not only practice, but in this way with our own minds and transform the world this way, but we also want to contribute to supporting vulnerable people in our community, to supporting each other, to loving and caring for each other in this time when it's so easy for fear to get us to be held in or kind of suspicious. And we really want to notice that all these fear states and stuff that arise naturally can be included in your heart, your heartfulness, your spacious awareness. And so if you want to donate, you can do that on the sundaysangha.net site, which Pulkit just posted in the chat. And each week I'll announce, and again, this week we're donating to Tipping Point. We have a little link to that, what that is there. And each week I'll announce how much we raised and who we gave it to. So let's just sit for one moment, a timeless moment, and so it's my hope that you will take what we talked about here and you will put it into practice in your own experience. And I'll be sitting each morning with you if you care to join on the morning meditations at 7. Usually I'm on by 6:45. But I hope in your day you'll practice where life is actually happening. And in this way, may we live more fully, even through this crisis. May we find strength and support in our own wakefulness, in our own being, presence, awareness, our own boundless nature. And may we continue to support and love each other now and always. So thank you all, and I wish you a good night and practice well. or don't practice well, just practice. That's good enough. Let it be the way it is. See you soon.